Hi everyone, Stepan here. In this game I'm going to show you a very interesting London system which I've played against a high rated opponent, excuse me, 250 points high rated at the time, which reminds me, people keep asking why I don't change my rating. Someone commented yesterday, I do change my rating. This was my rating at the time of the game. Now it's higher, but I always write down the rating under which I played the game. FIDE ratings get updated on the first of each month, and every game you played in the previous month gets calculated in. Okay, now let's get to the game. So I'm playing a young opponent, very strong. I decided to go with the London system again, and we get one of the very interesting main lines after d5, e3, c5, c3, queen b6 played. And now the optimal way to play is to go queen to b3, where after c4, queen c2, bishop f5 simply doesn't work because there's no knight on c6. So if bishop f5, queen f5, queen b2, queen c8, checkmate. So my opponent goes for what's a very topical way to develop his bishop from c8. He plays g6. Now, if I'm given another move, for example, he plays knight c6, okay, I play knight d2, he plays knight c6, then I would go e4, and he doesn't have a way to develop his bishop to f5. Since black hasn't played knight to c6, this pattern doesn't work. This is something you should know. Of course, if this is taken, you can choose which way you want to take on c4. I prefer taking with the bishop, just developing a piece and putting pressure on f7 with queen b3. But after g6, knight d2 played. Of course, he plays bishop f5 first, forcing my queen to c1. This is still theory. Okay, now one of the main ideas in this pawn structure, which is a pawn structure that's common in the London, where one side has advanced the c-pawn, is to undermine that structure. Therefore, what white has to do immediately, if given time, is to play b3 and undermine the structure. Before you do that, you still have to play bishop e2, knight to f3, h3, and castle. You don't want to give up your f4 bishop. Okay, so bishop to g7. Now knight h5 is threatened because there is no knight on f3, therefore bishop to e5 is impossible, so bishop to e2, preventing knight h5 and queen to c6. My opponent wants to support his pawn structure with the b pawn, which is okay, and we are sort of still in theoretical territory. b3, cb3. Now this is a strange follow-up to queen c6. I mean, perhaps he played queen c6 to be able to play knight d7 and rook c8, but that doesn't work because I have too many defenders of the c4 square, therefore I can advance the pawn if it gets attacked twice. And also I get to recapture with the a pawn, and now white should be slightly better. It's not a big mistake, but white should be slightly better. Basically, I'm going for c4 and breaking the structure open. He castled, excuse me, I played knight to f3. Now knight h5 is not a good move because of bishop e5. After knight bd7, knight h5 is strong, therefore I have to play h3. He plays a5 and I castled. Okay. So now he wants to prevent me from pushing my pawns, and he plays b5 to prevent c4, but it doesn't really prevent c4. I played it anyway. So I have to break open the structure, obviously. And if this is taken, rook c8 doesn't really work because I can take on d5. Not that I would take on d5, I would have played c5, gaining a passed pawn and highlighting this weakness on a5. But yeah, he of course doesn't take, he plays pawn to b4. Okay, I don't have to play c5 straight away. I want to keep the pawn structure fluid, I want to see what he does. And here there's a very strong move for white. I would argue that after this move white is winning, and I thought at the time when we were playing the game, I thought I was winning after this move. Not immediately, I don't win material, but I should have a strategic edge, which is long term, and it's going to be much harder to play for my opponent. And the idea is knight to e5. Now, I get to trade off one of the knights, which is important, because the knights want to get into b6 and want to support a4. But also, I get to put my bishop on e5 and trade off either the other knight or his dark squared bishop. And more importantly, I get to play bishop to f3 at some point to target this pawn. Okay, so here's what happened. He took on e5, of course, there is no better solution. Okay, bishop takes. And now he plays knight e4, which is, I'm going to say, a big mistake. This allows me to trade off the other knight, and it doesn't allow him to take on e5 once I do that. So once I take on e4, if he now takes on e5, then I can simply play knight c5, and this is a tremendous position. This bishop is much worse than the knight, so bishop to d6 would probably be what he should play. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, because if he plays bishop d6, I can take, and after queen takes, I have bishop f3, bishop e4 is impossible. So that's the main idea. Okay, and after knight e4, knight takes e4. If he plays bishop to e4, then he loses straight away. This is another thing. So he has to ruin his pawn structure. After bishop e4, I can simply play f3. Now, if bishop to f5 is played, then cd5, and I win a pawn. Because if that pawn is taken, I have e4 winning a piece. And after f3, if bishop e5, then simply fe4. And again, once this bishop moves away, I simply win material, and this should be an easily winning pawn majority. So after knight e4, he has to take d4, which now means that I have a passed pawn on the c file. My only concern is this bishop coming to d7 and black liquidating with a4, which isn't such a big deal. b4 is going to be a weakness, but I still would like to prevent that. Okay, I take on g7. There's no better move, because eventually I want to play d5 and c5. I don't want this bishop to become a monster. King takes, and now queen to c2. Queen to c2 has a very clear idea behind it. It's to play d5 and g4 and simply take on e4, after which his position would crumble. He plays g5, keeping the bishop on the diagonal. Fine, that's good. I should mention that instead of queen to c2, I had another way to play. I could have played rook to d1, and after bishop to d7, for example, simply rook to a2, and after a4, I can just go c5. If he then takes, or if he advances, then his position is just no good. I go d5 and crush him. If he takes, I simply go rook to b2. Okay, bishop e2, preventing d5, just bishop c4. And this, I mean, these two are falling. d5 is happening. White should be winning. So this was a better way to play. I did not see that because I was focused on targeting the e4 pawn. Again, after queen to c2, he has to play g5. I don't see any other option. And obviously g5 is a weakening move. Okay, g5, rook a2. I want to prevent a4. Again, if this bishop comes to d7 now, then d5, queen e4, or d5, queen g6, where the queen is just misplaced. Okay, rook a7, rook a1, rook f8, and now queen to d1. Queen d1 is, well, suboptimal in my opinion. My idea behind queen d1 was to trade off the light squared bishop. If I can trade off the light squared bishop, I get an outpost on c4 for my queen, which is a great square. Bishop d7 is never happening, therefore a4 is never happening. And also that this bishop is really no good for the moment. His bishop is much better, because best case I can play c5, bishop c4 and trade it off. Another idea is, for example, he plays two stupid moves and I don't know, something like this happens, and then I just win a rook. So I get the d4 square for my queen as well. So that was the idea behind queen d1. He played queen to c7, getting away from d5, supporting a5 and also defending his rook. And now I did play d5. Another idea to consider is c5. And if you turn on the engine in this position, it thinks white is +2, so this should be easily winning. And I agree. During the game, I just thought, okay, I'm just winning outright. This is an easily winning position. But it wasn't that simple. Okay, so if I do go c5, then he has to play bishop e6. He has to prevent bishop c4. If I play bishop c4, then yeah, fine, easily winning. So now rook c1, bishop d5, defending in advance, bishop c4, e6, takes, and c6. And now my rook is coming to c5. This is going to be a problem. In conjunction with queen g4 or queen h5, I don't see a way for black to defend. Instead, I played d5, still keeping c5 as an option, but I wanted to restrict the bishop. He plays queen c5 now, which at first I thought was impossible because of queen d4 check. So I thought that this endgame was winning for white. When I looked at it closely, after bishop to d7, I wasn't so sure, because c5, a4, c6, fine, that should be great. But he doesn't have to play a4. He can just wait. And I'm not sure I can queen my pawns. I'm not sure I have enough pressure. The endgame is definitely better for white, but I wasn't sure it was winning, so I didn't go for it. I wanted to win the game. So after queen c5, I went for a strategic exchange, which is not good. Again, I thought if I can trade off this bishop, I should win easily. So I played bishop to g4. If this is taken, black loses a pawn, so it cannot be taken. If it's not taken, he has to play bishop to g6, because otherwise I trade and play queen g4. So for example, something like this. Here, takes, and queen to g4. He has to trade, and this endgame is just game over. This is, I mean, white is much better, I think. Because his rooks are locked down, and my king can safely get up the board via king e2 and f3, and I'm undermining everything. So he played bishop g6. I offered the trade again. He came back. I offered the trade again. He came back. I offered the trade again. Because I realized that now that my bishop has been misplaced on g4, I've lost a key tempo, and I'm not sure how much better I am. So he could have gone for a draw here. I just lost my advantage with bishop to g4, which is something I've realized very quickly. Of course, in this position, after bishop g6, if I just go back, I lost a clear tempo. So, whoa, excuse me. So I had no better option. But after bishop h5, he played a4. I got to trade the bishop, so takes, hg6. And in this position, I blundered. So this position, of course, I'd considered, and I had it in mind when I played bishop to g4. But I'd completely misjudged it. The only way to play this is to actually take on a4. And after queen to c4, to play rook c2. And maybe something like queen d3, rook d2, queen c3. This should be equal. I mean, I shouldn't be losing my pawn that quickly, and if I do, I'm going to trade it for the b pawn. So this should be perfectly symmetrical and perfectly equal. After ba4, however, I blundered with queen to c2, and now black wins. So I went from +2 to, I don't know what the evaluation is here. Okay, it's -1.6. So I went from winning to losing in 3 moves. Why is this losing? Well, he takes on b3. My coach suggested a3, and he told me of a game which he'd lost with the protected passed a pawn. But in this position, it's not good because I can take on e4. If the e4 pawn was protected, then a3 is probably better, a better option. Instead, he takes, and I have to take. He trades, and I take, and here he blundered. So there is one way to win this position for black, and it's quite easy. Luckily for me, we both missed it. And I don't think it's an easy idea to miss, so I don't understand why we both missed it, but we did. So he took on a2. And now, even though this is much harder for white to play because queen b6 and b3, blah, 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 white can hold because I can get my king close to the pawn, close enough to be able to draw. However, after rook a2, there was a much stronger move. rook to a3. And people always say that it's easy to miss these moves that don't go all the way, like putting your rook somewhere that's not taking. But the point here is my queen is attacked. If I take the rook, then ba3, and now I can blunder and lose in a move. So if I go queen a2, for example, queen b4 just wins, because he plays queen b2 and that's it. And it's with check. So yeah, game over. So I would have to go queen a4 to prevent queen b6, because if queen b6 I take, if b2 I take, and I'm defending my c4 pawn. But now simply f6 and he starts approaching, and I think this is losing. So let's say I start bringing my king forward, he does the same. f4, I have to defend my pawn. King e5, this is an overwhelming advantage for black, because if I ever move my queen away, he either puts his queen on the b file or advances the pawn. So maybe g3, fg, I don't know, e6, just takes, king takes. I want to be black here. Yeah, this position should be winning for black. But he took on a2. And now I'm scrambling to get my king back. b3 is still not a threat because I have queen b2 check. So I played king f1, b3, queen b2, king h7, king e2, queen b4, c5. I want to give up my pawn if in any way possible. Queen c4 check. Of course, if he takes immediately, then I can take on b3, defending my d5 pawn. So queen c4 check. King e1. Yeah, this was important. If I play, for example, king to d1, then he can win a pawn and trade queens with check. If I play king to d2, then queen f1 is annoying, but I have king c3. So after queen c4, I just played king e1, which is the safest move, and queen takes d5, defending his b3 pawn, but c6. And now it's an easy draw because he has to take, and I take here. He tried to win from this position, but this is very, very easy to hold. Because the pawn structure is basically symmetrical, he has no easy pawn breaks, my queen is quite good, and his king is just as weak as mine with two weaknesses. So he played e6, queen b4, getting into e7, queen d5, queen e7, king g7, queen b4. I basically just have to prevent any annoying checks, and I should draw this position easily. Queen e5, king e2, queen f5, queen d4 check, e5, queen d5. As long as I stay on the d file with my queen, nothing's ever happening. g4 takes, king f1, f6, queen d8, king h6, g3. There is no way to break through, because if many pawns get traded off, then his king is naked and I have a perpetual check. He tried king g5, king g1, queen h5, queen d5, queen g4, queen d8, queen f5, queen d5. There's really not much to do here. If he ever gets his queen to h3 somehow, then I have queen d1 check. If he plays queen f3, I decline the trade. F5, queen to d8, threatening a checkmate on h4. He has to prevent it with g5, and now even his king has no squares. So queen d7, threatening nothing but just staying on the d file. Queen e2, king g2, queen f3, king g1, queen e2, king g2, queen f3, and here we agreed to a draw. But yeah, okay, we both missed a win. We both missed, his was more certain and more simple, I'm going to say. But I had such a strong position out of the opening. I was very upset that I'd messed it up. I mean, this is +2 or more. And I played d5. Instead of that, I should go c5, which makes perfect sense. I need to trade the bishops from the c4 square. From the c4 square, not from g4. And this way, he wouldn't have a good response. Because if we do trade, then I have queen g4 in the end. And if he does nothing, I have d5 eventually. So yeah, I was very, very upset after this one. I mean, a draw against a high-rated opponent is a good result, but this often happens to me, that I get a good position, but then misjudge it at a few important critical positions, and then and then my advantage just disappears. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say I should have won. I'm going to say that I shouldn't have misjudged this position, because a strong player would have won from here. You have too many advantages. You have a weakness to target on a5, you have a passed pawn, you have a weakness on e5, you have a weakness on g5, you have a safer king, you have a better pawn structure, his rooks are tied down to the defense of a5, I can easily maneuver my bishop into c4, even if he tries to blockade that with bishop e6. And basically, once I trade the bishops, I should be able to win. I just did not think properly during this one, and those ideas did not occur to me. Anyway, I hope you learned from this one. I did, and I'd spent a long time analyzing this position and this game, and I will spend more. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.